Tomb Raider Underworld was the pinnacle of Generation 2 Tomb Raider. For some players it was the end of Tomb Raider as we know it, for others it was but an introduction to a brand new age. Regardless, what are the 5 best moments in Tomb Raider Underworld, and why are they so memorable? Hello fellow raiders and welcome back to my humble abode. Last time I presented you with my favorite version of Lara, which might surprise you, so go watch it before it's buried forever by YouTube like they do with every single new video that I release. But now it's time to pay a visit to one of the darkest versions of Lara, Tomb Raider Underworld. I wanted to do a video specifically about scary moments, but remember the game is quite short and I never had the chance to play the DLC. Anyway, let's have a look at the 5 best moments in Tomb Raider Underworld. I'll be paying attention to the cutscenes, yes, but not exclusively. By the way, there are rumors that Square Enix are about to announce a new game, developed by Eidos. I think it could be a new Tomb Raider, so I wanted to let you know about the rumors. Now, going back to the video. We've got 5 memorable moments to review, so we'd better dive right into it. Now let's go! Number 5, the Kraken. The beginning of Tomb Raider Underworld is kind of weird. You get to explore some underwater ruins, and the developers, in a kind of apologetic manner, and in stark contradiction to the first level of Tomb Raider Legend, decided to put the emphasis on exploration only. Save a few sharks right at the beginning, there's no enemy at all during this stage. A viewer was asking during a live stream why I wasn't shooting at anything. Well, because there was nothing to shoot at. The Kraken included. I can clearly recall the first time I found myself in those ruins, just to be greeted by this guy. You can't shoot it, mind you. The thing is the puzzle. That's why it's memorable. Not only because he could slap Lara out of existence, just like that.
Look at this.
But it was also a first glimpse into the game's overall mythology, which I think is astounding. It's not really an enemy, but rather an obstacle, comparable to one of the best FPS ever made. Anyway, that kind of level design was brilliant, and it gave a new sense of scale to the Tomb Raider saga. I might be wrong, but I think this is the biggest thing Lara had to kill so far. That's another reason why it's memorable, and the cutscene makes a remarkable job presenting it. Different emotions are conveyed by Lara's reactions, and the player might stand in awe just contemplating it. A nice introduction to Tomb Raider Underworld, I must say. Number 4, meeting Natla for the first time. Not so long after you beat the Kraken, you get to meet an old familiar face, in the person of Natla, Jacqueline Natla. Of course, she has a French name, because why not? Since it's a bit difficult for me to pronounce, I'll call her Jackie if you don't mind. Anyway, some would say Jackie Natla was a desperate attempt to create a link between all 3 games in the trilogy, and maybe it was, but that's why the cutscene is memorable, because it says, hey, look at this is an actual trilogy, so expect recurring characters. And unlike the previous trilogy, these characters made sense. Amanda was a way to link Legend and Underworld, and Natla a way to link Anniversary and Underworld. This cutscene is memorable for how it relates all these games, giving the player a clear sense of progression if they play the rest of the trilogy, of course. Skip any part of it and that cutscene becomes meaningless. But aside from that, it was like the icing on the cake. There's a similar cutscene involving the same characters, but I chose this one in particular because of the element of surprise. I wanted to give the second cutscene a commendation because I know many fans like it. Now back to the first cutscene. If you pay attention to how the level was built, it's very different from my previous pick. The Kraken was memorable because it came after a long section without any compulsory kills, causing the player to stand in awe. For Natla it's quite the opposite. You barge your way onto the ship and kill dozens of enemies. The build-up to the cutscene is clearly focused on action, conveying a sense of emergency and giving the player something to hold on to for the rest of the story. There's a mystery though that I was never able to solve. Why does Amanda look like a duck? Number 3, the Hammer of the Gods. Finding the Hammer of the Gods in Tomb Raider Underworld is quite a feat. The so-called Hammer Room is like a platforming dreamland, with no less than 7 rooms to traverse and 4 hammers to ride before you can reach the ultimate prize, It was also the first time Lara was confronted to a Yeti thrall. With such a build-up, it's not surprising the moment Lara finds the Hammer of the Gods should rank in this list. Like Excalibur in Tomb Raider Legend, Mjolnir is basically the artifact Lara was looking for the whole game, the belt and the gauntlet being necessary steps before the hammer can be used. You could almost say that the devs learned a lesson from Excalibur, because you get to traverse 2 entire levels with the ability to use the hammer anytime you want, even underwater. Now that's original. In Legend, on the other hand, Excalibur was merely usable for the final boss fight only, which was kind of a missed opportunity, but yeah. The amount of distraction you can wreak with the hammer is remarkable. The feeling of power it bestows upon you contributes to making that part of the game quite memorable. Lara can swing the hammer and shoot a lightning bolt at the nearest target. She can also do a sort of ground pound, sending out a shockwave destroying any fragile objects in the immediate vicinity and knocking enemies off balance. The hammer may also target enemies or individual objects from a distance. The perfect weapon for a final level. What about you? Did you like it? What was your most memorable moment with the hammer? Let me know in the comment section. Number 2. Back to the Manor. Going back to the Manor was my second pick. Right off the bat, it is destroyed at the very beginning of the game. The Manor is a recurring motif in this game. They knew fully well what the Manor meant for Tomb Raider players, and destroying it was a bold decision to announce that a new generation was coming in a bang, so that one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the first part of the game revolves around why it was destroyed, and by whom. Going back to the Manor enables the player to answer those questions. The level emphasizes puzzle solving and exploration, like most other levels in Underworld actually. The moment you go back to the Manor is also your first encounter with the Thralls, so there's actually a lot to digest. It goes without saying that there's a strong sense of dramatic irony throughout the level, because the player knows what's gonna happen eventually, though they have no idea why it's going to happen. Another reason that moment in the game is memorable is because of the cutscene showing the return of the doppelganger from Anniversary, the missing piece in the puzzle of the Manor's destruction. For all these reasons, the moment the player goes back to the Manor was a strong contender for my number 1 pick. So if it's yours, let me know in the comment section below. In any case, the symbolic fallout of the cutscene showing the destruction of the Manor only became tangible once the reboot was announced, the year following the release of Underworld. Maybe it was also a means to encourage players to buy the DLCs, especially Beneath the Ashes, so that people would buy it. I mean, it's not like Microsoft has created Windows and could simply pull the DLCs on PC. But anyway, let's give a few honorable mentions before we move on to the most memorable moment in Tomb Raider Underworld. I pointed out in the past that Mexico was one of the best levels ever made in Tomb Raider, and also one of the most gorgeous, so it came as no surprise it should appear at some point in this list. The whole point of the Mexican jungle is entering Xibalba. The whole stage was designed around that. Once the door to Xibalba is open, you gotta rush to the entrance before it closes again. You could say it was part of the formula in Underworld, and you would be right, but this is not the only tomb to appear in my honorable mentions actually. If I were to make a list of the 5 best puzzles in Tomb Raider Underworld, the statue puzzle in Book of Ati would probably be among my top 3. Make sure to leave a comment if you want to see this video. Thing is, we're not really interested in the puzzles right now. Sure, it is quite a memorable moment, and like other puzzles it requires the player's full attention. Nothing is handed to you in this game. But aside from that, and however gorgeous that level is, it didn't make it into the list, because I felt it wasn't as impactful as my other picks. Another quite memorable enough moment would be the first time Lara discovers the gauntlet. This was the moment when the game began to have a good sense of scope, showing off how badass Lara could get. As for the puzzle itself, the fact that for the first time in a Tomb Raider game, Lara was able to rotate an entire walkway with a single hand is unforgettable, because it was the first glimpse at the power of the artifact. The power to solve puzzles. How original! By the way, let's see which moment got the first place.
I can see where the rumors of Thor's godlike strength came from.
Number 1, meeting Mommy. Meeting Lara's mommy. Now that is probably the most memorable moment in this game. I picked this cutscene in particular because of what Tomb Raider Underworld came to represent. The end of an era, as we said earlier, but more especially the end of a story started in Tomb Raider Legends. The moment we find out what happened to Lara's mother is memorable because it brought a sense of closure to that story. Perhaps a few players were disappointed by the result, but I mean, Tomb Raider is no fairy tale, and actually seeing her mother in such a state triggers a feeling of vengeance, the perfect build-up to the game's final boss. Well, assuming there's an actual one, but anyway. Another characteristic making that cutscene memorable is Amanda herself, the way her character evolves. Another reason that motivated my choice was that the moment Lara finds her mommy takes place right in the middle of another memorable moment. One that I have already mentioned actually. Yeah, that's right, the Hammer of the Gods. Lara finding her mom in the middle of an action-packed stage like Yggdrasil conveys a sense of relief and completion to the player. It was also the moment Lara and Amanda started to work together against Natla, another memorable part of this cinematic experience. Talking about Amanda, did you know that there was supposed to be another much darker ending? Amanda was supposed to betray Lara, and in the original ending, Amanda was shot and left to die in the cold, painting Lara in a more ambiguous light. As I said, Tomb Raider is no fairy tale. This would have been another great cutscene, but unfortunately, it was cut from the game. Similarly, I couldn't include the cutscenes from the DLCs, like Natla's actual death, or Lara meeting the doppelganger, simply because I never had the chance to play them. Anyway, thank you for watching, don't forget to leave an impression, a good one if you can, and let me know in the comment section below what your most memorable moment from Tomb Raider Underworld was, and what kind of content would you like to see on the channel. Did I forget anything? Also, don't forget to subscribe and see you next time for more Tomb Raider content. Oh, and remember, have fun!